aren't many blue-chip lawyers who seek to leave their profession behind to pursue their fortunes as entrepreneurs. And of those who do, very few go on to break totally new ground, creating a whole new product category by bringing to market the world's first 3D pen. Daniel Cowen, however, is not your typical entrepreneur. By no means a toy, the 3Doodler is his product and WobbleWorks his company. In November 2014, I invited Daniel to share with us his entrepreneurial journey in Hong Kong and asked him how it all came about.
I took a year off university, well, before university. So in the UK, it's very common for people to take a gap year.
Yeah.
So you finish high school, and then I took a year to travel, basically. I went to the Middle East, traveled quite a bit of Europe and the US, and then started uni the year after. So that was, 18 was like, oh, let's go and see the world, let's go and explore.
And you're Oxbridge graduated.
Yep.
You are a lawyer by profession.
Yep.
And you've had quite a high-flying corporate legal career before you became an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, I did my time. So I did my legal training in the UK, and then did almost 2 years with the firm over there before they sent me to Hong Kong. Was meant to be here for 6 months, and then 6 months turned into 4 years. And then finally left law after about 5 years. 5 years out here.
And what was the catalyst to leave the profession behind and to become an entrepreneur?
The main thing was seeing so many interesting deals and so many interesting companies, and only being on like our side of the fence of that. So we were documenting the deals, we weren't coming up with the ideas, and we weren't executing. And you get to a point when you're like, I want to be involved in that. I want to make ideas happen, I want to see them through. I don't just want to be there at a very temporary stage. So that was the main reason for leaving. What
was the biggest experience of culture shock, would you say, that you had in the first 6 to 12 months of being an entrepreneur, having left the closeted life of a high-flying corporate lawyer?
Having to ask for stuff again and again. And I knew that when I was leaving law. Like, I looked at the setup in a corporate firm, very hierarchical. Everyone's working at a very high level. And you ask for something to get done, it gets done well. Whereas in the real world, you have to ask people for things again and again. You have to manage people. You're dealing with stakeholders who may not be in professional services or used to the same standard. So not to sound picky, but you have to chase things down a lot more. That was the biggest shift.
And 3Doodler wasn't your first deal. What was your first deal?
So while I was a lawyer, but leaving law, I launched an iPhone app called Last Night Never Happened. And it was set up to delete everything on Facebook and Twitter from the night before. Did really well, took off, ended up becoming the highest selling app, well, highest downloaded free app in Austria, Australia, Norway, until Facebook closed off the API. So that did very well until then. And then we had another software startup that built on the success and the contacts we made with that first one. We got funding for that called Echoer. And Echoer was based around the idea of seeing what people were thinking in the places you were in, or the places you wanted to go to. So Twitter meets Foursquare in some ways.
And these are sort of algorithmic-based projects. And how does that time with those projects, how did that time with those projects impact on your decision to move into the world of 3Doodling? So
to some extent, it was an accident. I always say, luck is a thing that comes your way, and it depends what you do with it. I was in New York fundraising for Echoer, because we'd taken off in the Middle East, but not in the US. So we had to shift our focus. And while there, Max, my now business partner, showed me the first prototype of the 3Doodler, and I was blown away. So very much a mistake and an accident. The one thing I would say is that I didn't plan to get into hardware, but I'd got the taste for startup life. I'd got the taste for working in small teams and building your own product. And while the algorithmic aspect didn't carry across, the idea of how to launch a company, how to court the press, how to get PR, that carried across.
And how were you able to finagle the scenario so that you could re-domicile 3Doodler from North America to Hong Kong?
It was a natural progression for us. We manufacture in China, and Max and I had both lived out here for several years before 3Doodler. So we were coming out here a lot anyway, and it gradually made sense to look at whether we should be shipping the goods from here or shipping them to the US and then worldwide. And bit by bit, Hong Kong just became a rational choice for us. So it was less finagling and more gradual common sense.
How did you put the whole deal together? Because it involves manufacturing, international licensing. You've got quite a complex, very sophisticated operation that you've now headquartered in Hong Kong. Just talk us through how you're able to put all the moving parts together so that you've got what you've got going today.
So it was piece by piece. And where we started was Max and Pete in Somerville in what you call a makerspace. Basically a big warehouse where people have cubicles where they make things, coming up with the first 3 Doodler. We took that and went on Kickstarter. On Kickstarter we raised $2.34 million. So that took care of the capital part, which was making sure we had enough money to then build the business and build the product. Because Max had been in toys and products before, we had manufacturing contacts in China. Because I lived out here, I understood the legal system. Because I'd worked with my stepdad for a bit, I understood how to source things as well. So bit by bit, we found the factory, we had the money. We found the team while we were doing the Kickstarter. So some of the team who are now out here in Hong Kong were working with us part-time during that launch phase. There were 3 options really: sell the idea, license the idea, or do it ourselves. And if we were doing it ourselves, we needed money. And the best way to get money was to pre-sell the idea, which is what Kickstarter was for.
What was the initial target you set to raise yourself?
$30,000. Woefully low.
How do you get from $30,000 to more than $2 million in a program like that?
The right product at the right time in a market where things like 3D printing are buzzy and hyped. It was the perfect storm. And we planned the campaign very well. We really tried to use the campaign to explain what it could be used for, so that when people went on the page, they didn't just see this pen that could draw in the air. They saw what they could do with it and therefore wanted it. That plus seeding the press properly, getting people behind it at the get-go, and it built this momentum of its own.
So how has the internet enabled you to do the things that you're doing, and do you think that the 3D pen market has been enabled in the way that it has because of the internet?
We couldn't have done what we've done 5 or 10 years ago. Like 5 or 10 years ago, we would have had to license this to a toy company, making it a toy, which we're not branding it as right now. There was no Kickstarter. There was no sense of crowdfunding. 3D printing wasn't hyped up. We couldn't build an online community. I mean, everything about our business, every aspect of the product and what we're building around that product wouldn't have been feasible 5 or 10 years ago.
You're really, in a sense, a kind of a poster child for how to go about making Kickstarter work for yourself. Have you had people approach you and say, Daniel, teach us how to do this? We
have, and we sometimes do. We don't ask for money for that. We get both phone calls. We get phone calls from people who are like, there must be a secret recipe for this. Do you want to team up with us and basically sell the recipe? And we generally say no to that. It just doesn't feel right. Partly because every product and every business is different. Also because if we see a good idea, we'll give that advice freely. We want good ideas to succeed.
And your experience of manufacturing, in China, being here in Hong Kong, directing the international operations, do you think that Hong Kong is absolutely the right place for this business?
Absolutely. The proximity we have to our factories, to our engineers in China, to the ability to prototype, it's unparalleled. We can wake up in the morning, 7 a.m., still go to the gym, be on the bus to China by 8 or 9, and be in the factory by 10.
Where are the big markets for you at the moment, and what do you see as being your emerging markets over the next 2 to 5 years?
So the largest market geographically is the US. It probably accounts for over 50% of our sales. I'd say in the next few years we'll start to look at other markets like South America. We need to navigate the import-export issues there. I think China will be a big market for us in the coming year, particularly as we move towards 11/11, which is the big shopping day in China. And in terms of market segments, we did very well off the bat with the early adopters and the tech geeks and enthusiasts. And we've then moved into the arts, crafts and hobby market, which is slightly longer lead. In terms of future markets, education.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one for us. It's got a very long lead time, but once you're in there and your product is being used in classrooms, it's an evergreen.
What are the challenges of running a business like yours out of Hong Kong, and what are the strategic advantages of being in a place like Hong Kong, would you say?
The number one challenge is taking a lot of phone calls late at night when the US wakes up and trying to keep the time zones in mind. The other challenge is finding great staff. I think the markets like the UK, markets like the US are used to a startup culture, and they're used to the kind of roles that we're recruiting for, which are part creative, and they're very hands-on. Every employee takes a lot of responsibility. Hong Kong, I think, is more used to established roles and larger companies. So there's a cultural mismatch to some extent, but it just takes time.
What about talent locally? Have you been able to source all the skill sets that you need to be good at what you do?
Some of them. Yeah, there are certain skill sets that Hong Kong excels at. So the operations side, the logistics side, the administration side, accounting, a lot of the management, that Hong Kong is great for. The creative side, it's getting better. We're seeing some fantastic interns that we're busy training in the company coming through the ranks, and they're doing really well. But it's something they're behind on.
And commercially, how are you faring at the moment?
Really well. Yeah, it's been a great year for us. We wanted to do 100,000 pens this year. And as of today, end of December, we're at 130,000. So things are going really well. And I think next year will be even better for us.
So what comes next for you then?
Next, a lot more products in the pipeline. We're going to be revamping the whole product range in due course, bringing out new accessories, playing around with more materials as well, different plastics. And then we have some other devices up our sleeve as well that we want to bring out over the next 2 to 3 years.
So it's fair to say that you're really forging a new path with hardware in the 3 Doodler space that you're in. Is it fair to say that because you're first to market, you've got a good product and you're getting traction, you'll be able to be a sort of a forerunner, if you will, in this space ahead of your competition?
I think
for many years to come.
As long as we keep moving forward at the pace we have, we'll be okay. The aim is to be developing and advancing and innovating quicker than the other guy, so they're always playing catch up. Am I confident we can do that? We've got the right team.
It's all about constantly disrupting yourself, right, so that you can stay ahead of your competition and they never have a chance to catch up with you.
While also growing and not losing control.
What has surprised you as you've experienced the success that you have as you've implemented the plan? What's different in practice compared to what you thought it would be like when you were doing your planning initially?
The business plan has been pretty consistent. I'm surprised at how quickly we've achieved what we have. But the thing that really grabs me every day is our users and what they're using the pen for. And they're using it to make amazing things. They're using it to make scale models for architecture purposes. They're using it to write Braille. We've even had 2 design students here in Hong Kong use it to make a full-scale dress. It's mind-blowing.
So how many users have you got altogether now?
So we've shipped 130,000 pens. And I'd say at least 10% of those are extremely active online, making things and posting them on social channels.
Because you've created a tribe of unique users, right?
That's right. I mean, we approach our users not as wanting customers, but as wanting fans. Fans that we enable to make stuff, and then they inspire other people to make even more things with the pen. And that's really important to us. Like, if you have a fan base that's always creating and always showing what the product can be used for, that does your marketing for you, and that pushes the product for you.
And how fast is that fan base growing now?
Grows as fast as we can sell the pens, but the demand we're seeing right now during the Christmas period is just insane.